Back when I was young, before, obviously Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max, and all those other 1,000+ site streaming services came out, I was entertained by television. And I used to sit down on my couch pretty much all the time because back in the day, my parents used to leave early for work, and I have the whole entire day to sit down and play video games and watch TV. And in that time, I would watch college football, I would watch Cartoon Network, and of course, SpongeBob reruns.
They're coming for me. No, no, no! Stay back!
Wait, where'd you get that piano?
And in that time frame, while I was trying to channel surf and trying to find something to watch, I'll never forget the first two horror movies I saw that day, which was The Blob, and for some reason it had an afternoon time slot because, well, it really wasn't all that good.
Watching this screen, look out! Because soon, very soon, the most horrifying monster menace ever conceived will be oozing into this theater.
And of course, the second movie, which I still think holds up in fun factor today, is Tremors. But seriously, cut me some slack. They were my introduction to horror, and my so-called horror experience was pretty much PG-13 at that point. But I just kept coming across these B horror flicks, and I absolutely loved them. I really fell in love with them and just started to appreciate the genre.
Kevin Bacon, Fred Ward, Tremors.
So today I kind of want to talk about horror movies. I want to talk about why people should go and be interested in the genre and give it a chance. Yes, I know horror movies are not for everybody, and if it's not for you, that is perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with that. These are just some of my opinions and some of my favorite films that we're going to go over today that I think more people should watch and give a chance to. So, if you're a horror fan or someone who's trying to get into horror, sit back, relax, grab a drink, get a snack. We're going to have a good time. We're going to nerd out about some stuff and have some fun. And just be forewarned, there is going to be some blood, there is going to be some gore in some of these clips and some scary imagery. And if you're okay with that, well, let's rock and roll.
A little slow tonight, isn't it?
You remember how I said that my, horror experience was pretty much PG-13 for a while, especially when I was a kid? Well, that all changed one day, and you see, at the time, my aunt used to stay with us and was a sci-fi and horror aficionado. So much so, in fact, that one day when I walked downstairs, I saw a movie she was watching. And me being my 8-year-old self, I sat down and watched it with her. And it was about a bunch of people who took a wrong turn. Get it? Because that's the name of the movie. Poor jokes aside though, Wrong Turn was my first brutal horror movie I have ever seen. And it left such a mark on me when I was a kid because of the premise felt so real and grounded, and it made me scared of going to back roads and going into rural America and stuff like that. Now, looking back at it, it's an okay movie. It's not terrible, but back when I was a kid, it scared the ever-living shit out of me. And from then on, the floodgates just pretty much opened. My dad introduced me to Predator, which at the time when I was a kid, these so-called action heroes and commandos and these badass military guys are getting picked off one by one by an unknown threat in the jungle, which to me so hooked to see what this thing looked like and how this movie was going to go down. And it was phenomenal. And by the time I was a teenager, I started seeing movies like Alien. And by the time I saw Alien, it was pretty much hook, line, and sinker. I wanted to get into the horror genre. I kind of wanted to drop the action movies and stuff like that. Even though I didn't to an extent, I still wanted to start investigating horror movies and seeing what they were capable of and what directors had in store. Because, man, if you've ever seen the first Alien movie, you know how tension-filled this film really is. Horror has always been a fascinating topic to dive into simply because everyone isn't scared of the same thing. You might find a ghost or paranormal stuff disturbing and eerie, while someone else might find a home invasion scenario more terrifying. But the one thing that I love about horror is that it asks the forbidden questions that sometimes wouldn't come up in a conversation. Moving on from that though, it's always a fun time to sit down with family, friends, and watch a horror movie. And I'm being serious when I say this. Whether that be a slasher flick or a paranormal activity, it's always fun to see who jumps or who gets scared first. And you can always tell the ones that are horror veterans. You're probably asking yourself right now though, but I don't like to watch horror movies. What should I watch? Well, that depends on what you think is interesting. I always love movies with a great story, specifically horror movies that blend storytelling and mystery. Not ones that just have the jump scares, because honestly, that just makes me pissed off rather than enjoying a film. A great starter to horror, in my opinion, is one of my favorites that got me into post-apocalyptic movies, and that is none other than I Am Legend. You see, I Am Legend came out in... Holy crap, dude, what the fuck? 2007? My god. I remember getting the DVD for this back in the day and rewatching it over and over. And this is a solid movie, and I know the book is better, a lot of people say so, but regardless, this movie still does a decent job in illustrating some scenes, as well as building upon the bond with a great canine companion. It really does ask the viewer, if you were in this kind of situation, what would you do? How would you react? And if you found out that you're not alone, how would you handle yourself in survival situations? This movie single-handedly sparked an interest in post-apocalyptic shows and movies for me. And with that, I quickly fell in love with a thing called zombies.
Let's go, Sam. Come on.
Now, before anybody says that the I Am Legend movie doesn't have zombies, they're infected, I understand, I know, but that still got me into zombies and all that kind of stuff. Now, for those of you that weren't around for like the 2010, 2012 era and stuff like that, zombies were the biggest thing on screen. And one of the first movies to really kick it off was Dawn of the Dead, which was a 2004 remake of George A. Romero. Now, I love this movie. It was violent, it was fast-paced, it was gory, it was everything I wanted in a zombie movie, and I remember my aunt and I used to just watch this over and over again anytime it came on, because it's just a cool concept. Survivors trapped in a mall, surrounded by zombies. How much more fun can you get? Now, for many years, I believed that Dawn of the Dead was the pinnacle zombie movie. I thought that this was like the one that kicked off everything, that it came out right before the zombie craze and all that kind of stuff. But little did I know that there was a movie in 2002 that took zombies from being walking idiots into terrifying infected. And for those of you that know what movie I'm talking about, well, it was one of the best, and it made Dawn of the Dead look like child's play.
Hello? Hello?
You see, you have to understand the significance of 28 Days Later, because in the 70s and 80s, zombies weren't taken seriously when they were first conceptualized. People were scared of them, sure, but once they realized that, oh, all you have to do is just, walk around them, and the only time they're ever a threat is when they're in a group, well, they weren't all that threatening. But that was until this movie came along and introduced the rage virus, which means not only now were zombies more horrifying to look at, they didn't just walk to get you, they sprinted with everything they had. What 28 Days Later was able to do with just an $8 million budget, which might sound like a lot, but in all honesty, it really wasn't that much. It was able to catapult the zombie genre into being terrifying again. Now, a couple years later, they went ahead and they came out with a sequel, like all movies do, with great box office numbers, and it was called 28 Weeks Later. Now, this movie is definitely not bad. It has a very, very strong opening, and the plot of the movie is pretty basic, pretty simple, and once you realize how all the catastrophe starts, well, kind of pisses you off a little bit, but regardless, it still was a solid entry into the zombie genre.
Dawn! Help us!
Now, as the years went by, the zombie craze obviously went on the decline. With so much content and oversaturation on the market, it just was the same old formulas that the writers and the directors kept coming up with. Now, I wasn't one of those people. I still really like the zombie genre. I can still, to this day, sit down and watch a good zombie movie or show. It does not matter. And fortunately enough, in 2010, AMC premiered The Walking Dead. Now, when The Walking Dead first premiered back in 2010, I was one of the very millions of people that watched the pilot episode. And to this day, I don't care what anybody else says. I know The Walking Dead had a huge decline, and I personally stopped watching after season 5 because it just wasn't going anywhere. But to this day, I still believe that the first pilot episode of The Walking Dead is one of the best pilots ever made. It is up there with The Sopranos, The Wire, Game of Thrones. I mean, it was amazing. And even if you don't like the show or didn't like where it was heading, you gotta agree that the pilot set a really, really great tone. But like I said, after the fatigue of zombies really started to set in particular after The Walking Dead kept going around in circles with the plot, trying to emphasize that humans were more, deadly than zombies, well, then people just started to say, screw this, let's get out of it. Well, that all changed, because in 2016, we were quickly reminded of how amazing zombies could be. And who knew that South Korea would be the ones to remind us.
민대.
저 팀장님.
나 대전에 왔거든.
거기 우리 애들 있죠? 지금 우리 애들이랑 연락이 안 돼요, 연락이. 팀장님 여보세요?
살려주세요.
But what Train to Busan really showed is that this genre of zombies wasn't decaying. See what I did there? This movie really showed that the genre was still alive, and you didn't have to, depend on the tired old tropes of humans bad, but humans also good, all that kind of stuff. So I highly recommend anybody that's watching right now, if you really want to watch some good quality zombie content, go ahead, look at some South Korean shows and movies, because man, they have some good shit, and their zombies are not bad at all. They're really, really well done. But for the love of God, enough about zombies. You understand that I love zombies. I hope you like zombies too. But there are other genres that I would love to delve into. In particular, paranormal. Now, look, I'm going to be honest here. There are so many paranormal ghost movies that are fun to watch. Obviously, you have the ones like Paranormal Activity, which they're not terrible. They have some cool ideas and definitely cool set pieces as well. But in my opinion, are they the best? No. Like I said earlier, when it comes to paranormal movies, I like when they have a story. For instance, the first Conjuring movie is very well done. It's a very easy plot to follow, it has very good scares, and not all of them are jump scares, which is awesome, but overall it demonstrates an uneasy and tension-filled viewing. Like seriously, I love the first Conjuring movie because it does actually have a good story, and it's based on true events. But I always remember the second film for the one hallway scene. And yeah, you know what I'm talking about. That scared the shit out of me.
Honey? What's wrong?
Mom. Who's that? Go back.
You also can't forget about found footage films, which I'm going to be honest here, I'm not the biggest fan of a lot of these, but there are some really, really good ones that I would highly recommend. Number one being Wreck, which came out in 2007. Now, this film really demonstrates a little bit of everything with tension-filled scenes and and I mean very grounded atmosphere. But just please, for the love of God, make sure you watch the Spanish one and not the American one. Just because the American one has some cool scenes in it, but it's not as good as the original. Okay, so just FYI. And now I know I might get some hate for this, but I do recommend Blair Witch just to like watch it once just to say you've seen it, but I'm not the biggest fan of this. I know it's like the whole movie that started, found footage films, and when it came out, it was a really, really big revelation and stuff like that, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think it's okay, but I gotta give respect where it's due, and that's why it's on my list. But like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of found footage films, but I do recommend watching at least these two because they do offer some really, really good scenes. If you notice the trend so far, we've been talking about American movies with the occasional international films sprinkled in. But here's where everything kind of gets cranked up to 11, so to speak. You see, back in the early 90s, there was a country across the pond that was doing horror so well that it was actually making millions over here in North America. And well, you probably already guessed it. Japan is known for a couple things in their culture. Obviously, anime being one of the biggest things that they have. And I sometimes talk about it on this channel. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But they're also known for a couple other things. Horror being one of them. And they do horror so damn well. Now look, I personally didn't get introduced to Japanese horror movies until probably about a year and a half ago. And the movie that really got me into watching these kind of films was a movie called Pulse. Pulse came out in 2001, marking the age and the beginning of the internet. The movie tries to delve into themes such as, being connected online versus personal connections, loneliness, and of course the future of technology. Now, the concept of this movie is pretty interesting. There are ghosts that are inside your computers, and I know it sounds really, really dumb, but when you actually watch the movie, the first half of the movie does a really good job of explaining the plot. The problem with this film is that there is a second half of it. And not to sound harsh, but the movie really does faceplant near the end. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the movie is bad. It's definitely worth a watch, but it definitely could have been in a better direction. Now, you're probably asking yourself, well, Cyber, why are you bringing this film up if it's just average at best and sometimes doesn't stay compelling? Well, the reason I bring this movie up is because this was the first Japanese horror movie that I watched, and like I said, I didn't know what I was in for. But what does this movie offer besides being so-called average? Well, let me just say that I have never felt tension like I have ever felt in a film before I saw this. I know what you're saying. Well, you just said it was average. You're just contradicting yourself. Well, for those of you that are J-horror fans, you know that Pulse is very famous for an infamous scene in the movie. And I just want you to go ahead and watch this scene. There are no jump scares. There's nothing like that. I'm not that big of an asshole. I just want you to watch how well this is directed and how it makes the individual who's watching feel. And it is very unsettling and very eerie. And I know what a lot of you are thinking. You're probably saying like, well, that was creepy, sure, but it wasn't like that scary. It wasn't crazy. I said the same damn thing. I was like, hey, they gave me goosebumps. Great tension-filled scene. Unfortunately, when I went to bed that night, I woke up in a cold sweat and I had a nightmare because of that scene right there. That was the first time a horror movie has ever done that to me. And to this day, every time I see that scene, I get goosebumps every time. But anyways, J-horror movies overall are just very interesting to watch, alright? I'm not going to go ahead and cover the whole entire iceberg of J-horror and just stuff like that, just simply because it just would take me hours to go through. But if you really like horror movies, make sure to look in the 90s, because that's when this era was booming. You had movies like Audition, which will make you think twice about who you are dating on the other side of the phone. No, I'm being serious. And then of course you had the very famous Grudge movies, or Ju-on the Grudge, how they referred to it in Japan. These movies were actually pretty solid. They weren't really scary. They had some really great scenes, like obviously the one that you're seeing right now is the staircase scene, which to me is the one that still lives rent-free in my mind because of how great the actress is of just, you know, coming down the steps, and you're obviously going to see that right now, which that head peeking around the corner, not gonna lie, is pretty fucking creepy. But overall, regardless, this movie is pretty solid, but is nowhere near matched up to what I really liked as far as the J-horror scene. And to me, there's only one film that I think is masterclass, and not only giving a mysterious story, but also delivering on the frights and unsettling nature. And for those of you that have already kind of pieced it together, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The original Ring movie is my favorite horror film of all time. It combines everything I love about horror movies: tension, unsettling, and of course the soundtrack that oozes uneasiness throughout the film. This combining with a detective-like story that must be solved in 7 days is not only entertaining, but leaves you on the edge of your seat. The Ring for me embodies what horror movies should be, bordering on the lines of mystery and the unknown. When The Ring debuted, it put not only Japan on the map, but J-horror in general. It inspired countless movies after releasing. To this day, not only is this film regarded as a commercial success, but a cultural icon that is instantly recognizable. And I know that us Americans have had our, remake of The Ring, or Ringu, you know what I mean? But please, if you're doing yourself a disservice if you watch the American version, please watch the original Japanese version. It is so much better and executes such a better plot and story than the American one. I'm not saying it's bad, but just make sure you watch it, okay? Well, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, because I love nerding out about stuff that interests me, so I hope you don't mind me going off on a tangent about horror movies. I mean seriously, there's just so much fun stuff to go over that I really want to talk about on this channel, and there's stuff in this video that I didn't get to just because horror is such a cool genre to me, and I think there's so many great pop culture references that, even the Simpsons parody from like The Shining, I mean, come on, I love this clip. How can you not love this Simpsons clip?
Come on, give me the butt, give me the butt.
Scaredy cat.
So, next time you're going to have a awesome movie night with your significant other, family, or friends, don't be afraid to choose a horror flick. Whether that be a cheesy slasher or a paranormal ghost story, just remember to always have fun and enjoy.